The night is quiet along the edge of the Giza plateau, the kind of quiet that arrives only when the heat of the day finally releases its grip. You can almost feel the stones cooling under the soft desert breeze, the air slipping gently between the half-built walls and through the narrow alleys of a place most people never picture when they think of the pyramids. Because before there were monuments, there were villages. Long before tourists imagined slaves dragging stones in chains, this place was alive with the rhythms of ordinary people. Bakers stirring dough before dawn, brewers tending warm jars of fermenting beer, shepherds walking thin-tailed sheep along dusty lanes, women kneading barley flour with calloused hands, and children chasing each other around cooking pits that glowed with coals even after midnight. And tonight, you are here, just a quiet visitor in the shadows, watching the settlement breathe. A settlement archaeologists now call Hayt el Ghurab, but the workers simply called home. Somewhere behind you, down one of the sloping lanes, someone is laughing softly. Up ahead, a goat nudges an overturned basket. A warm smell drifts from a low doorway. Yeast, grain, and the unmistakable tang of beer mash. This is what fed the pyramids. And as you walk deeper into the village, the wooden doorframes worn smooth by thousands of hands, the faint glow of oil lamps trembling behind linen curtains, the distant crackle of a bread oven cooling for the night. You might already suspect the truth. You probably wouldn't make it through this day. Not the work, not the heat, and definitely not the diet, but those who lived here. They were strong in a way we rarely understand. Before we go further, take a moment. Settle. Breathe slowly. If you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this quiet little corner of the internet grow and lets more people drift off to gentle history like this. And if you're listening while you're drifting towards sleep, comment your location and the local time. It's always beautiful seeing the world listening together. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The scents, tastes, rituals and quiet routines of the people who actually built the pyramids. No pharaohs, no myths, just their food, their tables, their hunger, and the meals that kept a nation building toward the sky. The sun rises early here, earlier than your body would ever want it. Before the horizon even glows pink, the first sounds begin. A pot shifting, a basket being lifted, a woman humming a simple melody as she pours water into a clay bowl that has seen more mornings than she can count. If you step outside now, the desert air is still cool enough to breathe comfortably. You can smell the night dust settling, the damp straw in the animal pens, and the faint sour warmth of yesterday's beer still lingering in the air. This is breakfast, not in the modern sense, not quiet bowls of cereal or tidy plates of fruit, but a meal built entirely on bread and beer, the foundation of Egyptian life. A baker pounds barley flour in a deep wooden trough, her movements slow and practiced. Barley, not wheat, because wheat was precious. Bread made from barley is heavy, dense, slightly sour, and filled with the bits of grain that never fully grind down. But to the workers, this was comfort, familiar, nourishing. Beside her, another pair of hands prepares something even more essential. Beer dough, Egyptian beer wasn't crisp or bubbly. It was thick, cloudy, sweet with dates, filled with floating crumbs of half-fermented bread. To modern eyes, it would look more like warm porridge than anything you'd drink, but to a pyramid worker, it was fuel. Archaeologists found entire breweries right here in the worker village. Vats still stained with ancient mash, bread molds stacked in corners, clay stoppers scattered near the floors. These weren't symbolic offerings. They were industrial kitchens. At dawn, workers often received their first beer ration, about a liter, not to get drunk, but to hydrate. Beer was cleaner than water and safer than the Nile canals. The first historical fact slips in naturally here. Archaeological excavations show pyramid workers received bread, beer, onions, garlic, and sometimes dates as standard daily rations. Not slaves, not starving, fed enough to work. A second fact glows from a nearby doorway. Ration tablets found near the pyramid's list beef and fish allocations for larger crews, meaning workers had access to animal protein far more often than many later societies. But right now, at this early hour, the food is simple. A woman hands you a small, round barley loaf, still warm, firm on the outside, soft inside. The surface is dusted with flour, and you can feel the heat radiating through your fingers. Next, she offers a clay cup. The beer inside is warm, thick, faintly sweet, with a rich barley smell. This is breakfast. Bread heavy with grain, beer thick with yeast, a bite of onion for sharpness, maybe a few dried dates if someone has extra. And as the workers gather in the lanes around you, stretching, murmuring, sharing food, adjusting the cloth wrapped around their heads, the village comes alive. Soon the foreman will call. Soon the quarry ramps will fill with voices. Soon the sun will grow harsh and unforgiving. But for this moment, this sunrise, this simple meal, you're tasting exactly what they tasted. And tonight, as we follow them through their day, through midday heat, afternoon meals, evening feasts, celebrations, shortages, and the foods that shaped an empire, you'll see how everything they ate was part of a larger rhythm. A rhythm that fed the pyramids, the workers, the nation, and the memory of a people who built stone into eternity. By the time the sun finishes climbing over the eastern ridge, the cool breath of dawn has vanished. What replaces it is something heavier, a warmth that settles across your shoulders, your cheeks, the tops of your hands. It feels like a slow exhale from the desert itself. You follow the workers along the well-worn path leading toward the great construction ramps. The ground crunches softly beneath their sandals. A few carry small baskets. Others clutch linen-wrapped bundles. Someone hums a tune low in their throat. Something rhythmic, steady, the kind of melody that keeps footsteps even and minds awake. Already, the smell of crushed limestone dust fills the air. Already, the sun is bright enough that people squint instinctively. You stay close to the group, listening as voices rise in short bursts. Not conversation exactly, but the coded calls of laborers who know each other so well that a single tone can replace a sentence. And here, as the workday begins, hunger is something different. Not a hollow ache, more of a constant whisper, a reminder of the energy that will be demanded today. Around mid-morning, workers are allowed a brief pause, not a meal, but a snack, just enough to keep hands steady and legs strong. A man reaches into a basket and pulls out dried figs, their surfaces wrinkled and sticky in the growing heat. Another unwraps a small bundle of garlic cloves, sharp, pungent, almost spicy on the air. A few share small pieces of salted fish, transported all the way from the Nile Delta on reed boats that carried cargo upriver at remarkable speed. This moment gives us another quiet historical truth, slipping into the story naturally. Fact: papyrus ration lists show workers were regularly supplied with dried fish, garlic, and onions, all valued for energy and preventing illness. Garlic especially was prized. It wasn't just food. It was believed to strengthen the body and keep the spirit focused. Then there is a subtler detail, one of those strange cultural notes that feels almost too specific to be real. Obscure tidbit: some tomb artists painted garlic bulbs hanging in doorways as protection charms, suggesting garlic had spiritual force as well as nutritional value. It's small things like this: a cluster of cloves tucked into a worker's bag, or a fig shared between friends, that make the ancient world feel strangely familiar. Around you, the workers eat quickly, not rushed, just efficient. No one lingers. They know the day is long and the stone waits for no one. Once the brief pause ends, they rise together, dust off their hands, and begin moving stones, as if the sun itself is urging them forward. And as you fall into step beside them, your senses adjust to the heat, the dust, the rhythm of the work, and above it all, the knowledge that everything they eat, everything they drink, is chosen because it must keep them moving until sunset. By midday, the world looks different. The sun doesn't just shine, it presses, a slow, steady weight settling on your shoulders, the kind that makes the air shimmer, the kind that makes people seek shade without meaning to. The workers move into a long strip of shadow cast by a workshop wall. It's not much, but enough to give their eyes a break from the glittering stone. There is no communal feast, no decorative spread, just practical meals, portable, sturdy, predictable, the kind that survive a hot morning inside a linen wrap. Someone opens a bundle and pulls out a loaf of sour bread, darker than the breakfast bread, tougher, baked with barley and emmer wheat mixed together. It has a thick crust to protect the softer inside, ideal for long shifts. A woman close by pulls out a small clay jar of beer, sealed with a wad of linen. She offers you some, and you tilt the jar just enough to see the thick, muddy brew inside. It smells of barley, dates, and yeast, a drink that tastes like energy and endurance. Next to her, a man unwraps a portion of salted fish, its surface rough, with preserved salt crystals. The heat softens it slightly, making the smell stronger. From another bundle, fresh green onions appear, long, bright, and sharp, their fragrance cutting through the heavy midday air like a wake-up call. And here comes the second pair of historical facts, gentle as footsteps in sand. Fact: excavations at Giza show workers received huge quantities of fresh onions, leeks, and radishes, likely because they were easy to transport, provided vitamins, and boosted immunity. Fact: large cattle bones found in the workers' village show workers had access to beef, a food normally reserved for the elite. Evidence of a well-fed labor force, not slaves. You chew a piece of bread. It's dense, slightly sour, but satisfying. The beer washes it down easily, thick enough to feel like food itself. Another obscure cultural detail rises naturally from the scene. Obscure tidbit: Egyptians believed onions helped restore breath and freshen the heart, so workers often used them as both food and medicine. You begin to understand why these foods mattered, not just for strength, not just for health, but because meals like this were a moment of normalcy, even comfort, in a day that demanded everything from their bodies. And as the workers sit in the faint shade, their backs against the warm stone, the village oven still hours away, everyone eats quietly. This isn't a feast, it's survival, a steady, familiar rhythm built from grain, beer, salt, and the simple foods that power thousands of hands. In a few minutes, they will rise again. The afternoon sun will burn hotter. The stone ramps will echo with voices, and the work will continue. But for now, this small meal is enough. Just bread, beer, onions, fish, and the strength to keep going. By early afternoon, the sky has turned into a pale sheet of burning light. The horizon wavers. The stone ramps radiate warmth strong enough to rise through your sandals. Even the breeze, when it appears at all, feels like air exhaled from a kiln. This is the part of the day most people never imagine. The part you probably wouldn't survive. The workers keep moving, but their steps grow slower, more deliberate. Every motion is rationed. A lift, a tug, a shove, a breath. Their bodies learn to do the work with as little wasted energy as possible, because the sun takes something from them each hour. You can almost see the thirst tightening their faces. Not dramatic, just constant. Someone reaches into a clay jar and drinks. It's not cold. Nothing stays cold, but it's wet, and that's all that matters. This is where the real truth emerges. They didn't drink plain water. They didn't trust it. Water pulled from Nile canals carried silt, bacteria, and whatever drifted downstream. Instead, the workers relied on beer because the fermentation process killed much of what could hurt them. You hear a foreman call out a reminder. Workers should take a sip every time the sun touches the tip of a shadow line. It's a simple method of hydration tracking, something crews understand without looking at the sky too often. And here lies another quiet historical fact. Egyptian workers consumed between 3 and 4 liters of beer per day, not as alcohol, but as liquid nutrition. It wasn't intoxicating. It was thick, nutritious, and life-saving. Meanwhile, a man from the Delta hands out another ration: dried Malakia leaves, the kind that were often boiled into stew, but here used for quick energy. They're bitter, thin, and not particularly pleasant on their own. But in this heat, even bitterness feels refreshing. You watch someone chew a piece of dried carob, using it like we might use hard candy, something to stimulate saliva, to trick the mouth. into thinking it isn't drying out. And then, drifting into the dusty air, comes an obscure belief from daily life. Obscure tidbit. Some Egyptians wore tiny linen pouches filled with crushed cumin near their necks because they believed the scent could cool the breath. You notice a few workers wearing them now, small bundles tied with frayed cords, barely noticeable unless you look closely. As the afternoon presses onward, the air thickens. Your clothes cling. Your mouth dries. You feel your pulse tick a little faster. This is the hour when the sun wins, unless you're trained to withstand it. And yet, somehow, they keep going, hands steady, steps measured, faces focused. Food gave them energy, but ritual, habit, and shared endurance gave them everything else. When the light finally begins to shift, just a subtle softening around the edges of the sky, the workers stop, not because they are told to, but because the world itself changes. The heat loosens, shadows lengthen, the air becomes something you can breathe again. They walk back toward the village in small clusters, each person quiet in that familiar end of day way. Tired bodies, peaceful minds, thinking only of food. Tonight's meal is heavier than the others. Egyptians always saved their best eating for the evening. You can smell it long before you enter the lanes. The deep aroma of stewing lentils, the smoky scent of roasting fish, and the mouth-watering fragrance of garlic sizzling in oil. Near one house, a pot sits over a low fire. Inside, something thick and bubbling, lentil stew, colored with cumin and coriander. Someone stirs it slowly with a wooden spoon worn down from years of use. A few steps away, another family grills tilapia, the fish caught in wide nets along the riverbank. Its skin crackles as it cooks, releasing a salty, earthy smell that blends with the smoke of burning acacia wood. Children bring baskets of fresh bread, their surfaces covered in small blisters from the oven heat, and on a woven mat nearby, you see radishes, cucumbers, soft cheese wrapped in linen, a bowl of dates so ripe they shine. This was no starvation camp. This was a village that understood nourishment. The first historical fact of the evening appears like a gentle reminder. Fact: excavations at the workers' village uncovered huge quantities of cattle, bones, many from young animals, proving that workers were fed meat regularly, something peasants in later eras rarely enjoyed. You see this truth simmering in another pot, a stew of beef and onions, thick with fat rendered slowly over the fire. Not an everyday luxury, but common enough for celebration days, rest periods, or high output work weeks. Then comes a quieter, more intimate detail. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians flavored many of their dishes with fenugreek, believing it strengthened the lungs. Even today, the seeds smell faintly sweet, like burned sugar and hay. You can smell it now, drifting from someone's pot, a sweet undertone beneath the sharper scents of garlic and fish. Families gather on mats. Workers sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing portions without ceremony. The village glows warm with oil lamps, each flame softening the edges of the night. And as you sit among them, a loaf of warm bread in your hand, a bowl of stew cooling in front of you, you start to understand the bigger picture. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was the glue of the community, the comfort after long hours, the reward for surviving another day under the sun. And in this moment, as the desert breeze finally turns cool, the workers eat slowly, gratefully, peacefully, the same way you might eat after a long day, if the meal waiting for you was something that tasted like home. The soft coolness of evening deepens as the last streaks of sunlight fade behind the western desert ridge. But tonight, something is different. You can hear it in the sound of the voices, brighter, fuller. You can smell it in the air, richer, deeper, threaded with spices that don't appear every night. You can feel it in the way people walk, lighter, almost festive. It's a feast day, not a royal festival. Those happened in temples, full of incense and priests, but a worker's feast, simple, earthy, and full of joy. At the far end of the village, near a wide open courtyard, women gather around a long, shallow fire, pit lined with smooth stones. A pot the size of a small barrel sits suspended above the flames, steam curling from its rim in thick waves. Inside is tagamia, a kind of early Egyptian falafel made from crushed fava beans, herbs, and garlic. The mixture is molded into patties and fried in oil, sending up little bursts of scent each time one hits the hot surface. Beside it, another group prepares semidet, a sweet cake made from dates and honey. The dough is sticky, warm, and fragrant. Someone shapes it into small discs with practiced hands, flattening each one with a thumbprint in the center. Further down the line, a group of men skin and prepare a goat, a rare but welcome luxury. Its roasted meat will feed Downsons. You walk slowly between the small campfires that glow like embers scattered across the courtyard. Bread bakes on flat stones. Children carry bowls of lentils and beans. Elders sprinkle salt carefully, almost ceremonially. And somewhere in the soft noise of celebration, a new historical truth emerges. Fact: archaeological remains from the Giza workers' village include vast quantities of animal bones from goats, sheep, and cattle, showing that workers received far more meat than typical peasants of later eras. Feast days weren't rare miracles. They were woven into the rhythm of life. Someone places a clay cup in your hand. It's filled with date wine, lightly fermented, sweet enough that you can taste the sun still lingering in the fruit. Egyptians didn't drink wine casually. It was for celebrations, offerings, and moments when the ordinary day tilted just a little toward joy. Then comes the gently strange piece of the evening. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians sometimes scattered small pieces of bread around feast fires for wandering spirits, believing that contented ghosts would bless the meal. You see it now. Little crumbs tossed around the fire pit by an elderly woman humming under her breath. As the stars take the sky, the meal begins, slowly and warmly. No rush, no hierarchy here, just people sitting close, plates in their laps, sharing the food that makes the hard days worth enduring. You take a bite of the tagamia, crispy outside, soft inside, fragrant with coriander. The sweet cake tastes like honey warmed by the sun. It's not a royal banquet, but somehow it feels richer because it's made with labor, laughter, and the quiet triumph of having made it through another week. Later in the night, as the village settles into a deeper calm, you begin to notice something subtle, not tension, not division, but a quiet structure that shapes the way food flows through the community. Egypt wasn't a land of equals, but it also wasn't a land where workers starved while overseers feasted lavishly. Instead, food created a kind of social rhythm, a soft ladder of privilege, noticeable but not cruel. Across the courtyard, you see the four men sitting together. Their plates are fuller, their bread is finer, likely made from emmer wheat, not barley. Their beer is lighter in colour, perhaps brewed with more date syrup, and on a small wooden tray between them lies something even rarer, duck, roasted until the skin turns deep bronze, seasoned with herbs and sliced carefully. This leads naturally into a calm historical truth. Fact: administrative records from the Old Kingdom list special rations of duck, geese, and beef for foremen, scribes, and skilled craftsmen, while laborers received more consistent but simpler diets. But even here, the divide is not a wall. A little boy runs up to the foreman's group, and one of them tears off a piece of duck and hands it to him with a wink. Food travels. Food softens boundaries. Further away, the bakers, a respected profession, enjoy their own small parks. Their bread is always freshest, the crust soft enough to tear without effort. The brewers, proud of their craft, sip beer directly from the fermentation, jars with reed straws, tasting the batch for quality. Meanwhile, the quarry workers, broad and dust-coated, sit in a circle sharing lentils, onions, and salted fish, their laughter carrying through the night like a warm, confident hum. And then something small but culturally revealing happens. A woman places a bowl of figs in the center of her family's mat and then sets aside 3 figs on a separate dish, untouched, reserved. Why? Not superstition, not rationing, obscure tidbit. Egyptians believed setting aside a small portion of food for the gods ensured the meal remained blessed and the household protected. Even the poorest families did this. Even the richest did this. It was one of the few traditions that crossed every level of society. As you watch these gentle rituals unfold, shared plates, small offerings, subtle differences in food between ranks, you begin to understand a simple truth. The workers didn't just survive, they lived. They cooked, they celebrated, they held on to dignity in the way people always have, through food, shared in whatever measure they had. The night grows deeper. The lamps flicker softly. The meal ends slowly, naturally, with warm hands, full stomachs, and the quiet peace that follows a long day. And somewhere in the distance, you hear the first low whistle of the desert wind returning, a reminder that tomorrow the sun will rise again, the stones will wait, and the food will once more shape the rhythm of the day. Night in the worker village has its own kind of heartbeat, not loud, not busy, just steady, a slow rhythm of small sounds echoing through narrow lanes, clay pots shifting on shelves, a goat rustling in its pen, the faint clink of a brewer adjusting a lid. But the strongest rhythm comes from the ovens, dozens of them, low, round, clay structures that look almost like sleeping animals, each one glowing softly from within. These aren't the roaring ovens of a restaurant. They burn gently, fed by dry dung and thin bundles of scrub wood. Enough heat to bake, but never enough to scorch. You walk toward the nearest one, feeling a faint warmth roll toward you. A woman sits beside it, cross-legged, shaping dough into tight cones, the traditional Egyptian loaf that later scribes would describe so lovingly. Inside the oven, the air is golden. You can see rows of loaves rising slowly, their surfaces cracking gently as heat works its way through them. The smell, it's a blanket, warm, sweet, nutty, the kind of scent that settles your breathing the moment it touches you. Bread was everything here. Food, currency, medicine, blessing, ration, comfort. A baker hands you a piece of dough to feel, soft, sticky, cool. She kneads it slowly, pushing with the heel of her palm, turning it, pressing again. And in this simple act, a quiet historical truth lives. Fact: archaeologists found more than 400 bread molds in the Giza worker zones, proving that bread production was industrial, continuous, and essential. Across the lane, another family shapes bread differently. Flat discs meant to cook quickly for the next day's early meal. Children help by dusting flour over the top, their tiny hands leaving fingerprints in the surface. The night is filled with this calm industry, not rushed, not demanding, just present. And in the shadows, a small, charming detail emerges. Obscure tidbit. Some workers scored tiny symbols into their bread loaves, personal marks, so they could identify their share in the communal oven. You notice it now. A little spiral, a tiny star, 3 straight lines, markings that make each loaf feel like someone's small claim to nourishment. The ovens glow like soft moons scattered across the village, keeping the night warm, lighting faces with a gentle amber wash. This is the real Egypt that built the pyramids, not grand, not gilded, but warm, human, alive, with the simple pleasure of making food for tomorrow. And as the first batch of bread is pulled out, steam rising into the cool night air, you can almost taste the next day beginning already. Further down the lane, past the fading glow of the ovens, the night grows quieter. You hear children giggling somewhere, not the frantic sound of daytime play, but that soft, sleepy laughter that comes when the world is slowing down. A tiny figure appears at a doorway, holding a bowl, a little girl no more than 5, balancing something carefully with both hands. Her mother follows, smiling faintly, carrying her own bowl filled with a thick porridge. This is kid food, simple, nourishing, gentle on small stomachs, a mixture of mashed fava beans, barley porridge, goat milk or watered yogurt, tiny pieces of soft bread, a drizzle of date syrup on special days. This wasn't just about taste, it was survival. Another historical truth settles into the scene like a soft breath. Fact: child remains from worker communities show signs of careful nutrition, fewer deficiencies than many rural populations, proving families made sure children received consistent, balanced food. The little girl dips a piece of bread into her porridge and takes a bite, so content you can feel it in your chest. Nearby, a group of older children share dried dates and a few pieces of soft cheese wrapped in linen, treats that store well and travel easily. Someone hands a toddler a small clump of crushed chickpeas mixed with oil, a kind of early hummus. He squishes it between his fingers before eating it, leaving oily handprints on his tunic. And here, among these tiny habits, comes another small truth from the culture. Obscure tidbit. Egyptian mothers often whispered protective prayers into a child's food, believing the blessing would enter their body along with the meal. You witness it now, a quiet murmur, a gentle touch on the child's head, a little nod toward the night sky. The children's diets weren't separate from adult diets. They were simply softer, sweeter, easier. Everything boiled or mashed, everything warm, everything designed to build strength. A mother offers you a taste of fainjet, a soft mash of lentils and barley flavored with a hint of honey. It's smooth but hearty, the kind of food that makes your body relax without thinking about it. Children curl up beside their parents. A few play with leftover bits of dough from the ovens. The oldest hum lullabies they learned from watching their mothers work. In the glow of the lamps, with the smell of bread still drifting across the village, you feel something you didn't expect. The world of the workers wasn't just labor and survival. It was tenderness, ordinary care, quiet protection. Food wasn't just fuel for stone. It was love, simple, practical, constant. And in this moment, watching a family share their last bites of the evening, you understand that the pyramids may have been built by hands, but they were sustained by meals like this, soft, warm, human. As the village settles into a deeper darkness, something subtle begins to happen. A movement here, a whispered exchange there, small footsteps across dusty alleyways. Not suspicious, simply human. It's the workers' night trading hour. No official market existed here. Nothing sanctioned, nothing recorded. But every Egyptian village had these soft, unspoken routines, a kind of barter economy that awakened only after the foreman slept. You see, it unfolds slowly. A man steps out of his doorway, holding a linen-wrapped bundle. Inside is cumin, freshly crushed, potent, fragrant, worth more than its weight in grain. He trades it for fish oil, which another family received from a cousin who works near the river. A brewer slips a small clay jar to a neighbor, the first straw from a new beer batch, sweeter and richer than the ration jars. In return, he receives a handful of raisins imported from the Delta. Two women exchange baked goods, honey discs for garlic bulbs, each smiling at the other with a nod that says, "Yes, this is fair." These are quiet deals, done just with the flicker of oil lamps behind half-open doors. No haggling, no tension, just people shaping their evenings with tiny luxuries. And here folds in the next historical truth. Fact: excavations at Deir el Medina, a later worker village show workers operated informal barter networks trading spices, fish, perfumes, dyes, and even bread recipes, a system likely mirrored at Giza centuries earlier. It wasn't formal commerce, it was gentle survival. A woman offers you a basket of fresh herbs, chervil and chicory, in exchange for a small pinch of salt from your hand. Salt was precious. Herbs were fragrant. The trade feels personal, warm, almost intimate. Then, drifting naturally from the scene, we meet one of the most charming cultural quirks. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians often traded leftover incense or aromatic resin in tiny twisted packets of linen, not for religion, for scenting their cupboards and clothes. You see it now, a rolled pouch passed between two men. They both smile. Clothes that smell faintly of resin last longer in the desert heat. The village's quiet trading web extends across every lane. Not greed, not profit, just neighbors helping neighbors, improving their meals in small, beautiful ways. And with each faint exchange, herbs, fig oil, spices, bread, the night grows softer, warmer, more human. Further into the night, you find yourself near a low courtyard lit by a single flickering lamp. A group of women sit together on woven mats, speaking softly while their children sleep in small clusters nearby. Tonight, one woman is visibly pregnant, her hands resting gently on her belly, her breathing slow and steady. The others have brought her small dishes of food, each one chosen with intention and memory. Pregnancy in ancient Egypt wasn't medicalized. It was communal. Women supported women, and food was one of the most powerful tools they had. You watch as a bowl is placed in the pregnant woman's lap, sweetened barley porridge with date syrup, thick and warm. Another woman hands her pieces of soft cheese made from goat milk and strained through linen until creamy. It's rare, considered strengthening for the body. A third offers her fresh figs, rich in fiber and natural sugars, perfect for calming the stomach. And then you notice something else, a small clay bowl filled with a mixture you don't recognize. It's ground fenugreek seeds, mixed with a bit of honey and warm water, bittersweet, nutritious. And here, woven gently into the story, comes a deep historical truth. Fact: papyrus medical texts record dozens of pregnancy foods and herbal mixtures, including honey, fenugreek, cumin water, dates, and barley porridge, believed to strengthen both mother and child. The air smells of sweet porridge, warm herbs, and lamp oil. The women speak in soft tones, sharing advice, telling stories of births they remember, babies they've delivered, cravings that felt too strong to ignore. You lean closer, catching snippets. She wanted nothing but garlic for 3 days. He kicked every time I ate lotus seeds. Brew this again tomorrow. She needs strength. Then comes the kind of detail only everyday life reveals. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians believed pregnant women should avoid onions on days when the wind came from the west, because it might heat the body too much. A woman lifts the bowl of onions away from the pregnant mother with a gentle nod, not fear, just tradition. Someone brings a small cup of tiger nut milk, made from chufa soaked and ground into a sweet, milky liquid. It's rare, a treat usually saved for celebrations. The pregnant woman takes a sip and closes her eyes. The others smile. She says something softly. It tastes like calm. Around them, the night breathes lightly. The desert wind shifts direction. A distant goat bleats once. A baby stirs and then falls still. The meals tonight aren't heavy or rich. They are gentle, intimate, full of intention. Food becomes a way to protect, support, nurture, long before medicine existed. Watching them, you understand the truth. The pyramids weren't only built by strength. They were built by communities like this, by women who fed each other, cared for each other, and passed down the quiet knowledge of how to keep life safe. The village is more than a labor camp. It's a home, a cradle, a kitchen, a place where the next generation of pyramid builders sleeps peacefully under a sky full of stars. The village is almost silent now. The lamps have burned down to thin embers. The children are asleep. The animals doze in their pens. Even the warm glow of the bread ovens has dimmed to a faint orange pulse. But you notice something moving through the shadows. Quiet figures slipping out of doorways, each holding something small, wrapped in linen or tucked into a palm. These are the midnight hunger people, not greedy, not wasteful, just workers whose bodies burned through dinner long before the night cooled. They gather near a central courtyard where a single fire smoulders low. No flames, just heat, perfect for warming small bits of food without waking anyone. A young man unwraps a tiny loaf of leftover bread, so stale it knocks lightly when he taps it with his fingernail. He holds it near the coals until the crust softens slightly. A woman arrives with a handful of roasted lupin beans, salted earlier in the day. She squeezes them one by one out of their shells, dropping the skins into the fire where they curl into thin ribbons. Another worker opens a linen pouch and reveals a single precious luxury, 2 dried apricots. They glow almost amber in the firelight, soft around the edges. He breaks one in half and gives it to a friend. Midnight generosity, the kind only hunger can make sacred. And then a man sits beside you and unwraps what looks like a small cluster of rocks. But when he cracks one open, you see the truth. Dried lotus seeds, crunchy, mild, faintly sweet. Egyptians treasured these, easy to store, easy to carry. Filled with quiet energy, another gentle historical truth folds into the scene. Fact: lotus seeds appear in dozens of tomb offerings and were found in worker villages in small personal stashes, suggesting they were used as both food and good luck charms. A woman removes a tiny ball of something soft from a linen knot. You recognize it after a moment. Semen paste mixed with honey, rolled into a little sphere. An early energy bite. She offers it to her partner, who takes a small nibble and nods gratefully. Then comes one of the most touching nightly habits. Workers sometimes saved one mouthful from their dinners, not for hunger, not for rationing, but for companionship. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians believed sharing a small snack after dark helped cool the heart, keeping friendships strong and resentments away. You see that now small pieces of bread passed between hands, a few beans shared, a single fig split 3 ways. The night is quiet, but not lonely. People sit close, warming their food by the fire, whispering soft fragments of the day, small jokes, small complaints, small wishes. And as you watch them eat in this soft half light, you realize these secret midnight bites remind them they're still human, still comforted, still part of something warm, even in the deepest dark. Not long after the midnight hunger settles, another group gathers in a small corner of the village, near a table covered with baskets. This is where the sweet makers work. Egypt had no sugar in these days, but sweetness existed, rare, precious, crafted carefully like art. On the table, you see dates mashed into thick syrup, honey, golden and sticky, harvested from hives along the Nile, tiger nuts ground into sweet, milky paste, raisins, sun-dried on linen mats, carob pods, chewed for their natural sweetness, juju berries, tiny and tart. Tonight, the sweet makers prepare something simple but magical. Medjool paste, crushed dates mixed with sesame and shaped into little oblong cakes. You watch them work. A woman grinds sesame seeds with a stone pestle until they release a warm nutty fragrance. Another kneads the date pulp between her palms, softening it with a touch of water. When the two ingredients meet, sesame and date, the aroma is almost intoxicating. Warm, rich, deeply sweet. Nearby, a man stirs a clay pot filled with hot honey, letting it bubble just enough to thicken. He pours it over tiger nut flour, stirring slowly until it forms a sticky, glistening dough. This mixture, rolled into small spheres, was more than a dessert. Fact, offerings of tiger nut sweets were found in tombs and households alike. They were believed to energize the body and sweeten the spirit. Egyptians loved sweetness, but they treated it with reverence. It wasn't eaten casually. A mother gives her daughter a single honey cake. The child's eyes widen, as if she's been given treasure. A man saves a date ball in a tiny jar, keeping it for a hard day's work ahead. Another hands his share to a pregnant woman, claiming she needs it more, a soft reflection of another truth. Obscure tidbit. Egyptians believed that eating something sweet before dawn could bring good luck for the entire day. Someone hands you a piece of honey-striped tiger nut paste. It melts slowly on your tongue, leaving behind a warm, earthy sweetness that feels almost ancient. In this moment, you realize something. They didn't crave sweetness the way we do. They didn't binge it, didn't hide it, didn't overindulge. They honored it. A treat given at the right moment felt like hope, like celebration, like a blessing whispered into the corners of the night. And as the sweet makers pack away their ingredients, wrapping tiny treasures in linen bundles for the next day, you understand that the workers lived not in deprivation, but in a delicate balance of effort, nourishment, and carefully placed joys. Their sweets may have been rare, but their appreciation for them ran deep, rooted in tradition, ritual, and the warm belief that sweetness fed the soul as much as the body. Most nights in the worker village feel steady predictable rhythms of bread, beer, onions, lentils, fish, the occasional treat of meat or sweets. But Egypt, even in its greatest ages, was never immune to hardship. And tonight, as you walk through the village, you sense it. Something smaller in the voices, something tighter in the movements, something thinner in the cooking fires. A lean year has arrived. Nile floods weren't always generous. Some years the water rose too low, leaving fields thirsty. Other years, the silt carried downstream was weak, leaving the soil pale and hungry. When that happened, food shrank, rations narrowed, meals became inventions. You see it now. A woman stirs a pot that is thinner than usual, lentils stretched with barley husk, flavored mostly with salt and hope. A man kneels by the fire roasting dried radish leaves, making them crispy enough to chew. Children snack on parched grains toasted until they turn into warm, crunchy bits. No one complains. Egyptians had thousands of years of practice at adjusting to famine. Their ancestors taught them quiet strategies, passed down like lullabies. It folds naturally into the night's first historical truth. Fact: Egyptian texts record at least 7 major famine cycles, during which grain was rationed tightly and workers relied more heavily on lentils, radishes, dried fish, and emergency grain reserves stored in state granaries. But scarcity didn't mean despair. A woman pulls a clay jar from a shelf. Inside are lotus roots, dried when the river was low but not absent. She soaks them in warm water, slowly reviving their texture. Their flavor is mild, gentle, grassy, a comfort in a difficult season. A man opens a little linen pouch and pours out roasted chickpeas, saved carefully from better months. He divides them evenly between his children. His wife gives him a look that carries both gratitude and worry. And then something beautifully human happens. People begin to share. One worker hands a neighbor a piece of stale bread softened in warm water. Another offers the last 2 figs from her storage basket. Someone else pulls a dried fish head from a jar, used to flavor stew even when the meat is long gone. Scarcity makes generosity louder, not quieter. Across the shadows, a gentle cultural belief emerges. Obscure tidbit: Egyptians believed that feeding others during lean years brought Heka, a kind of spiritual power that returned to the giver tenfold. Tonight, you see Heka everywhere. Small gifts, split rations, unspoken promises of "I'll remember this when things improve." The meal may be thin, but the community feels fuller than ever. And as you sit among them, chewing roasted leaves and warm grain, you feel the truth. The pyramids weren't only built by abundance, they were built by resilience, a collective refusal to let hunger divide them. Later in the night, when the last of the meager meal has been eaten and the stars shimmer like ancient gold flecks spilled across a black sheet, you notice something gentle happening across the village. The workers begin praying over their food scraps, not loudly, not formally, just small gestures of gratitude and protection performed in doorways, beside cooking pots, or near storage jars. A man places his palm over a bowl and whispers, may tomorrow be enough. A woman sets aside a single grain of barley on a windowsill, an offering to the household god who guards the threshold. A child dips a finger into the last bit of lentil stew and draws a tiny spiral on the ground. His mother smiles fondly. She taught him that spiral, the simple mark of continuity, of things returning, of life circling back. You walk through the lanes and see other rituals. A brewer pours a drop of unfermented beer into the dust and murmurs a blessing to Hathor, goddess of nourishment and joy. A baker traces a line across her oven door, thanking Renenutet, the goddess of harvests, for the little she still provided. A grandmother lights a cone of incense, aromatic resin that smells like honey mixed with wood smoke, and lets it burn slowly over a handmade clay burner. This movement of incense through the air carries the next historical truth gently into view. Fact: incense offerings before meals appear frequently in household shrines, especially to gods connected with fertility, health, and safe sleep. But even more touching is what happens next. A man reaches into a woven basket and removes an object wrapped in linen, a small amulet, a jed pillar, symbol of stability. He sets it beside his bowl, touches it with 2 fingers, and closes his eyes. Another woman unwraps a feather she keeps hidden in a pot, a symbol of Maat, the principle of truth and balance. She places the feather atop a folded cloth where her children sleep. These are not rituals driven by fear. They are rituals driven by care. Egyptians didn't separate food and faith. To eat was to honor the world. To sleep was to trust it. And then, emerging softly from the night, comes an obscure cultural whisper, obscure tidbit. Egyptians believed that if a person spoke kindly over their food, the next day's meals would answer kindly in return. A simple, beautiful belief, and tonight you see it in full. Families speaking gently, hands brushing the rims of bowls, soft hopes settling into warm night air. You sit down beside a small fire, warmed by its last handful of glowing coals. You take a tiny portion of lotus root offered to you earlier. You close your eyes. You breathe. The night is deep now. The village is quiet, and in the stillness, you feel the workers' prayers settle around you like a blanket, warm, humble, full of meaning. This is not the Egypt of monuments. This is the Egypt of hearts, of hands, of simple rituals spoken into darkness. And tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. Food, work, heat, hope, bread, prayer, sleep, all woven together under the same desert sky. The night grows cooler now, settling into that soft, almost tender darkness that makes every sound feel closer, every flicker of lamplight a little warmer. You walk slowly through the narrow alleys, noticing something you hadn't paid attention to before. Small chests, clay jars sealed with linen, baskets tucked into corners, covered with mats or inverted bowls. This village is filled with hidden food, not hoarding, not secrecy born of selfishness, just a deep understanding that the desert is unpredictable, and food, even the simplest food, must be honored by making it last. A woman lifts the lid, from a wide clay jar, and the smell drifts up. Salted fish, firm and sharp, packed tightly in layers. Fish was abundant during high Nile seasons, so families preserved it with generous handfuls of desert salt, drying the meat until it became leathery and long-lasting. She removes a piece and holds it to the fire until the edges soften. The texture is still dense, but the flavor is rich, something that satisfies even in small amounts. Nearby, two men sit beside a stack of reed baskets, weaving new lids for jars of dried onions. Each ring is brittle, translucent, almost as light as paper. They crumble under too much pressure, but stored in cool jars, they last months. Further down the lane, you see dried pigeon meat, hung high to keep it safe from dogs and dust. Pigeon was a prized food, quick to raise, dense with nutrients, and easy to preserve by drying over low smoke for hours until it darkened to a deep reddish brown. Then comes the glow of something unexpected. A girl pulls out a small box of dried dates. Flattened into a sticky brick, she cuts off a piece with a bronze knife, wraps it in linen, and tucks it into a jar labeled with a tiny scratched symbol, her family's mark. It's a simple act, but it carries the next historical truth. Workers kept personal food stores inside sealed jars, some marked with signatures, showing that individuals and families maintain small emergency reserves independent of ration distributions. You move through the village, watching these small acts: lotus roots sliced and dried, grains parched in shallow pans, garlic braided and hung, lentils spread on mats to dry, herbs tied into bundles, crisping over warm air. Each gesture reminds you of how carefully life had to be managed. Then comes a soft detail that belongs only to everyday life. Some families hid their best spices inside hollowed out pottery shards placed beneath beds, a quiet protection against theft, but mostly a way to keep fragrances safe from heat. You see a woman remove one such shard now. Inside lies a pinch of safflower, bright red, delicate, used sparingly to color food and lift spirits on difficult nights. Preservation wasn't desperation, it was wisdom. And tonight, watching them seal jars, tie cords, check lids, and tuck baskets into corners, you feel the truth. Food wasn't just nourishment, it was foresight, a way of telling the future, one dried lentil at a time. The air shifts again as you walk toward the southeastern quarter of the village, the place where the strongest workers sleep: quarrymen, ramp haulers, stone lifters, the ones who face the most dangerous tasks at dawn. Tonight, a small fire burns outside their quarters. Around it sit a group of men preparing strength meals, foods reserved for the hardest days. A man lifts a clay pot from the fire, removing the lid slowly. Inside is a thick stew made from goat meat, lentils, and coriander seeds. The aroma is heavy, warm, deeply comforting. Meat wasn't an everyday food, but the night before, a dangerous task. Tradition demanded it. A second pot boils with something simpler: barley dumplings, small and heavy, flavored with garlic and onion. Workers believed these dumplings stayed in the stomach longer, giving strength that didn't fade. Then comes the quiet appearance of concentrated beer mash, thick, almost like porridge. It's rich with yeast, grain, and the remnants of fermentation, a natural energy source that Egyptians believed warmed the muscles. A man dips his fingers in, tastes it, nods, and that leads naturally into the first historical truth of the section. Texts and archaeological remains show special rations for workers performing high-risk labor, extra meat, thicker beer, and barley-based energy foods reserved for days of intense construction. The fire crackles softly. The men eat slowly, breathing deeply between bites, letting warmth spread through their bodies. But then another ritual unfolds. One worker pulls a small bag from his belt and sprinkles black cumin seeds over his stew, not for flavor, but because Egyptians believed black cumin strengthened the lungs and protected against injury. Another man breaks open a pod of carob, chewing the sweet interior for calmness. A third unwraps a tiny amulet and dips it briefly into his stew, a symbolic act to bless the food with protection. And then a whisper of an intimate cultural truth rises from memory. Before dangerous work, some men ate a single roasted garlic clove and whispered, "For breath, for courage," believing it steadied the heart. You see it now. A man sits quietly, holding a garlic clove between his fingers. He places it on his tongue. His breathing slows. Around the fire, no one speaks for a long moment. It's a silence filled with camaraderie, trust, and the knowledge that tomorrow the stone will test them. They finish their strength meals, meat stews, heavy dumplings, hot mash, garlic, cumin. Then they sit back, letting their bodies rest, listening to the wind shift across the sand. A few murmur to the gods of protection, to Ptah, to Burs, to any spirit that might watch over them when the ramps rise. The flames soften, the food settles into their stomachs, the night deepens around their quiet circle, and in that dim glow you feel what they feel. Courage is not loud. Strength is not shouting. Sometimes it's just a warm meal, shared in silence, before the world asks you to lift more than you should. The fire pits burn low. Most lamps have been extinguished. The village has fallen into that late night stillness where even the animals grow calm, their movements soft and slow, as if respecting the sleep that's settling around them. You walk between the small clusters of sleeping mats. Each family rests close together, knees touching, hands near hands, the quiet warmth of community woven into the way they breathe. But before sleep claims them completely, something intimate unfolds. The feeling after a meal. The workers lie on their backs, one arm draped across their stomachs, a gesture so universal, so timeless, that you can feel yourself mirroring it without thinking. A kind of contentment, a heaviness that isn't uncomfortable, just grounding, and warm and familiar. A man turns to his wife and whispers softly about the stew. Just a few words, not praise, not critique, just a shared memory of the taste, while it's still fresh on their tongues. A mother smooths her child's hair, humming a tune that probably predates the pyramids themselves. The little boy nestles closer, a smear of date syrup still sticky near the corner of his mouth. A group of young workers lies under the open sky, pointing faintly at stars, their fingers tracing constellations they learned from older craftsmen, patterns that helped farmers track seasons and helped laborers track rest days. Food did more than feed them. It anchored them. It softened the sharp edges of exhaustion. This leads naturally to a gentle truth. Egyptian texts describe food not just as sustenance, but as ka, support, meaning nourishment for the soul force, a belief that every meal strengthened both body and spirit. You feel that now, not in some mystical way, but in the simple human way that a warm meal makes you feel capable again, present again, alive again. And among the workers, this emotional bond with food is palpable. Meals weren't just eaten, they were shared, remembered, woven into the stories they told each other. Fish stew tasted like teamwork, bread tasted like survival, dates tasted like festivals, beer tasted like rest. An elderly man closes his eyes with a soft sigh, one of those sighs that seems to let go of an entire day all at once. He places a hand on his chest and the other hand on the clay jar beside him, as if grateful for both breath and bread. You stay with them for a while, listening to the quiet murmurs, breathing in the last hints of garlic and grain still hanging in the air, feeling the calm settle deeper. This is the Egypt people forget. Not the temples, not the pharaohs, not the monuments, but this moment, this fullness, this peace. The stars shimmer above the desert, thousands of them, bright enough to cast the faintest shadows across the sand. The moon rises slowly, pale and wide, touching the tops of the half-built structures with silver. The entire worker village is drifting into sleep. Mats are arranged carefully, pots placed upside down, bread covered with linen, tools cleaned and set aside, fires reduced to glowing breaths of ember. One by one, the families give in to fatigue. You notice all the little final gestures. A woman tucking a loaf in a basket with a cloth embroidered by her grandmother. A man tying a jar of lentils shut with a tiny knot meant to ward off pests. An older worker sprinkling a few drops of water on the ground as an offering for protection through the night. A child whispering good night to a clay figurine. An amulet shaped like Bess, the household protector. He presses it to his cheek for a moment, then sets it beside his pillow. Even the animals settle in their own way. Goats curl into soft heaps. Dogs lay near doorways, snouts resting on tails. A cat slinks across a rooftop, its silhouette cutting gently across moonlight. In the distance, the unfinished pyramid looms, but it feels different at night. Not an achievement, not a burden, not a monument, just a silent companion, watching over the sleeping village, its presence steady, ancient, and strangely comforting. And in this final moment, before the village melts into complete stillness, you see a few workers sit quietly with their last thoughts of the day, hands folded, eyes lowered, breathing slow. Food sits warm in their bellies. The day sits behind them. The night settles around them like a blanket. And then the village sleeps, a deep, slow, collective exhale, the kind that only comes from a place built on shared labor, shared meals, and shared humanity. Everything grows soft, everything grows quiet, everything grows warm beneath the moon. You stay with them for a long moment, listening to the distant chirp of a desert night insect, the soft rustle of linen against skin, the whisper of sand shifting against stone, and slowly, gently, beautifully, the story fades into stillness. The night deepens over the desert, and the last traces of the day dissolve like dust carried off by a gentle breeze. Above the workers' village, the sky stretches wide and calm, a canvas of muted blue and silver where the stars appear to breathe slowly, brightening and dimming in a rhythm that matches the quiet rise and fall of sleeping bodies below. You can almost feel the coolness of the sand beneath you, the softness of the air as it slips through narrow alleyways and drifts across open courtyards, carrying with it the faint sense of bread still lingering from the ovens, and the warmth of earlier meals that comforted the workers after their long, demanding day. Nothing presses here, nothing rushes, nothing asks for more. The village, so full of life and labor, only hours ago, lies completely at peace. Each doorway shelters a family resting close together, hands touching, breathes steady, hearts eased by the knowledge that they have done enough for one day. In the quiet, you can almost hear their dreams beginning, dreams shaped by hope, by memory, by stories whispered during evening meals, and by the soft weight of food that now warms them from within. Even the unfinished pyramid seems at rest, its sharp lines softened by moonlight, its vast stones no longer heavy or daunting, but gentle, protective, watching the village the way a guardian might watch over sleeping children. The night wraps everything in a slow, serene embrace. The people, the animals, the tools, the food jars sealed for tomorrow, and the soft glow of embers still whispering their last heat into the air. And as you breathe with this quiet world, letting the stillness settle into your own body, you feel yourself drifting slowly, gently, deeply into your own peaceful rest.